welcome to another episode of Shooting
the Shit with Rachel Ann
and Neil Young. So we're talking all things real estate photography business growth, mindset, and getting it done. Here come your favorite true entrepreneurs, Rachel Ann and Neil Young, shooting the shit.
I have a ferret on the podcast. Like if we're kind of in a slump, like what kind of things do you do?
Talking about a boob light.
Straddling a power line.
Nice photo.
Ooh, I need that.
I'm like red right now because I'm embarrassed. I go like this. I love it.
Come in.
Sure, use your podcast voice.
You know, over here, I'm pitting out.
Drone's like flipping to the ground.
That's a great callback.
Chit-chatting.
Is that what you call that? Hey!
We are talking all about drone today. Get excited.
Yay!
Woo! I know we've talked about drone before, but we're going to just focus entirely on drone. Nothing but drone. Well, we're going to try really hard anyway. Knowing us.
We were writing out our show notes for this one, and I'm like, Neil, we've talked about this. And we looked back on our episodes, and I cannot find where we talked about it. Neil can't either. So some of this may be a repeat, but this is a condensed episode fully dedicated to drone in your business. Right. Yes.
And why you need to do it and how to get going.
Yes. And gear and rules and pricing, all that good stuff.
The whole shebang, all about drone. Hopefully we're going to answer all of your questions here. If we don't, you need to hit us up on social media and say, hey, Neil, hey, Rach, I have another question you guys didn't answer. And we would love to hear that because we love to do a little mini series coming up about additional questions you guys might have. All right?
Yes. And our Instagram handle is Shooting the Shit with Rach and Neil.
Yeah.
Find us
Perfect. There we go. All right. So cool. Here we go.
Yeah. So cool. It's so cool.
It's so cool.
So cool. All right. Well, Neil, why would somebody want to add drone into their repertoire of services?
Right. Well, to make more money is one reason, but also to separate yourself. Okay. So there is that kind of barrier of entry. Not everybody does drones. So that's one thing that's going to separate you from your competition. The people who just do the stills, maybe they do the floor plan. Floor plan is easy to get into now, but drone, you still got to get the approval to get your Part 107 to be legit. And not everybody wants to put in the time and the effort to do that. There's also the cost of having to get some gear to do it. So I think it's one more thing to separate you from 100 other photographers out there who aren't doing it. What about you, Rach?
I think it's a great way, an entry into video work. So if you're not currently offering video,
yes,
you could offer a drone video, which is great. That's what I did in the beginning. So I got my Part 107 and I did photos and I did Matterport, but I didn't do interior video yet because it was just scary. It took me almost 2 years before I got into the interior video. And I would offer a drone video of the exterior combined with a slideshow video of the photos that I took of the interior. And I'd put it together in iMovie, super easy edits, and I would apply the Ken Burns effect to the photos so they look like it kind of zooms in and zooms out on each photo, like still photo. So it looks like they're kind of moving. But that way, also the dynamic range is better on the interior stuff because you can't get as good of dynamic range with the video camera. But my clients absolutely loved those. They were a hit. So it was a good way for me to kind of like a stepping stone into video work.
And it doesn't take a lot of time either. You already got the drone in the air. You're already doing stills. To take some video stuff it doesn't take a whole lot more time. And you can also offer something that I offer is just a standalone drone video too. And sometimes people get that, especially for land and stuff like that. But even on houses, even to get something else for social media, drone flying around the house, it gets attention. So it's cool.
Yeah. Definitely.
Cool.
Yeah. So if you're going to add drone as a service, you do have to get your Part 107 license. Right. So this is your drone license so that you can fly commercially. There is a hefty fine for you and the realtor if you get caught flying without a license. Now, I've been doing this 6 years and no one's ever asked me for my license. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't get it. You should definitely have it because you never know when you're going to crash into someone's car and they're going to ask you for your license, right?
Yeah, that's when it's going to happen for sure. Yeah. Yes.
It's like driving without car insurance. Like it's just a bad idea. Just don't do it.
So get it. You'll be on the up and up. You'll feel proud. You'll have another post for social media when you get your Part 107 little license. You actually get a little card, and you're like, "Yeah, look at me, I'm a pilot."
And it's a great thing to put on your bio on social media. So if you put
Mhm.
certified drone pilot, people are like, "Wow, I've had like 3 people tell me, "Oh, wow, that's cool. You're a certified drone pilot." And I'm like, yeah, we all are." But people don't know that. So
And there are a lot of people flying drones around that don't have their Part 107, and it is another way to separate yourself and to look more professional than them.
mhm.
And you can even mention it to your clients. Sometimes we'll talk about getting approvals and stuff like that. Not everybody's doing the right thing, but when you mention to the agents, hey, yeah, you want to make sure that your photographers all have their Part 107. Everybody at our company has their Part 107, because a lot of people don't realize this, but not only would we get a fine, but actually the realtors get a fine for hiring us too. So if you
Mhm.
didn't have your Part 107, then they're like, oh, I wonder if that other guy has one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So not another way to separate you from the pack.
And when you get your license, it's good for 2 years, and then you have to go in and do a renewal. Make sure you don't miss your renewal date, or you'll have to take that whole test over again. It took me like 2 hours to do the test, and it's not
Oh,
easy.
yeah.
It's like crazy stuff. I'm like, why do I need to know this to fly a drone? But
Yes.
for some
No,
reason you do.
it is
You have
silly.
to study to pass, honestly. It's not just like
You-
common knowledge.
You really do. And yeah, I wouldn't, if you showed up and wung it, I think you'd be like, what is happening? What are these questions? If a airplane's taking off northwest on runway 3 and what does this have to do with me? I'm not going to be near the runway, but you
Right.
got to know the answers. So, but don't let that overwhelm you either. There are resources to help you to know how to study for that particular test. I just did Tony Northrope. He has a free video on YouTube, and I listened to that. And there's also an online training, like practice test you can do. That's what I did, and I passed the test. There's also courses that you can pay to do courses. If you feel like you need a little additional more than that, then certainly do one of those courses. But they kind of help you know, when you work when you're in college and you know a teacher after a couple tests, you kind of know what to look for, how to answer the questions, and what are the questions he's going to ask. That's what these videos help you out with, to understand what they're really looking for. So
Exactly. And these are actual questions that are on the test, especially the ones Tony has are like straight from the test, like
Yeah.
verbatim. So it was really good it's like an hour. I think it's 2.5 hours, his video, isn't it? It's long. Maybe it's
yeah,
not.
it's
long.
it's really
Very
thorough.
informative. Yeah.
And the test takes a little while. You're going to this little booth all by yourself with a pencil, and it's kind of crazy. I had to go to the actual airport, an office in the airport, and go in and take a test, and then it costs. I forget what it costs now. It's not a lot. What is it?
I think it's 200. I want to say it's $200. Yeah. Yeah. I did the online Drone Launch Academy, and I listened to Tony Northrop's stuff. And then there was like a sample test that I printed out and studied from as well.
Exactly.
So I did those 3 things and I passed.
Right. And then now, it used to be you had to take that test all the time, but now the renewal process is much easier. After you do that the first time, the renewal is some online, it's very simple, like kind of refresher, just to make sure you haven't forgot everything you learned. So it was way better when I renewed. So that's the good news about that. But yeah, get that out of the way. But that's also good news, because that's what's separating you from everybody else. Is not everybody's doing this Part 107, and you'll be one step above them.
Yes. So we're going to talk about getting insured, but let's talk about the rules first.
Okay.
Neil.
Yeah, some of the major things that you should know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's some weird ones for sure, but general rule of thumb is you need approvals, first of all. Not everywhere is okay to just take off. And there's a different set of rules for Part 107 flyers, us that are doing it professionally. That's when you need your Part 107. You might fly under both sets of rules. If you were just out practicing in a field and you weren't doing anything for professional work, then you might be under the recreational rules, which, funny enough, sometimes are to your advantage in certain scenarios to fly under those set of rules. But the rule of thumb, why you might fly under one or the other, is, are you flying right now for professional work? Then you have to follow the Part 107 rules, or are you just doing for fun? Then it's not as relevant. But yeah, it's a little more strict actually for us, Part 107, sometimes when we're trying to fly in certain areas. So you got to make sure that it's okay to fly wherever you go, which is a little bit of a hassle, especially where I live, because I live a few miles from an airport, a decent sized airport here in Manchester, New Hampshire. So a lot of the areas around here are tricky to actually be able to take off. Sometimes you just got to sign away your life in the app and stuff and say, and to fly, but sometimes they might prevent you from flying altogether. But what you want to start out by doing is getting an approval, and you can do that online. You can also do it via an app. Do you do it on your desktop usually, Rach, or do you an app
Yeah.
when you get your approvals?
So first off, the way that you find if you can fly or not, you download the app called B4U Fly, and it's the letter B, the number 4, the letter U, and then fly, FLY. And then you put in the address of where you're going to fly, and it'll tell you whether or not you need approval. So I would recommend always doing that before your jobs, especially if they're near an airport, because it sucks when you get to a job and you're like, oh, it says I can't fly here. I'll come back tomorrow after I get approval. But Neil just led me on to Air Control, which is an app on your phone where you can get approval on site in most cases. But no, I do it on my computer through the DJI.com
Okay.
platform.
Yep. So I used to use AirMap, and then I don't know, they were updating something this past year, and I still use it as a resource to look at AirMap. You can go to airmap.com, or you can get an app, and it'll just pull up a map. You just type in the address, and it'll show you a map, and it'll show you how high you can fly in an area. It might say 400 feet, it might say 100 feet, it might say 0. And that doesn't mean you don't necessarily need approval still. So if it's it'll show you those diagrams. If you once you do your Part 107, you'll see these different diagrams for airspaces and stuff, and it'll show you. But anytime you're within that airspace, it's really all about planes is the big concern about flying your drone. So if it's anywhere near somewhere that planes or helicopters might be, then you may need some form of approval. I would say probably 90% of the time I can get the approval through my app, but there are some areas, especially that are really close to airports, where it has like a 0 height. It won't let you do an auto approval. And in that scenario, you might have to submit one to the FAA. And just know that you need a few days of ahead of time to be able to submit that, because that's real people reviewing this written document you have to kind of fill out and send to them with all the information about your flight and why you need to fly, and tell them that you're going to be safe, basically. And so they only work business days as well. If you work on weekends, they're not looking on weekends. So like I had it this week, actually yesterday, they booked something on Friday for a shoot on Monday, and they want a drone, and it was in the 0 fly zone. And I had to tell them, hey, I might be able to get approval for this, but it's very unlikely that they're going to see this today or in the morning, Monday before our flight. It's not going to happen most likely. And it didn't. They still haven't responded to me today on Tuesday. So I had to tell them, there's a chance we won't be able to do this drone flight without the approval. But you have two choices. We can see if I get the approval, and if we do, we'll fly, or we can push this shoot back till later in the week. And they're like, nah, the drone's not that important. If you get it, great. If not, okay. So that's the scenario we ended up under, not doing the drone.
Yeah.
But yeah, just know that. And that's at the drone zone, FAA drone zone. You set up an account there, you register your drones there. When you get your drones, you have to register the number of your drone and all this little stuff to fly commercially. And then when you do, that's FAA submission, you can get approval in areas that normally would be not allowed at all. You sometimes can get this approval to do it anyway from them, but just know you need a few days in advance, business days, to get that most of the time.
And just so you guys know, you might be thinking, well, I'll just fly anyway. Who cares? Your drone will not let you take off. There is geofencing in place, at least with the DJI drones, where it just says cannot take off and you physically can't fly. Or if it doesn't sync to your GPS, because when you turn the drone on, it takes a minute for the GPS to catch up and link to your drone. It'll let you take off, but then it says auto landing in 10 seconds. And it's it doesn't care where you are. So if you fly out over these trees, and then it says auto landing in 10 seconds, it will descend and come back to home, but it doesn't watch out for those trees. It's terrifying. I've had that happen a few times, and I've been like, oh my gosh, now land.
And the bad part about that is the FAA and your DJI app and all that, they don't communicate perfectly. So you might actually have approval in an area. This happened to me actually a couple of days ago. I was flying in an area where I had approval, and all of a sudden the thing said, forcing to land or whatever it says. And I just had to, void stuff as it's coming down. So just be aware. There are scenarios, especially if we both have DJI. Your experience may be different if you have something else that doesn't, follow those same rules. But you may have scenarios where you have to tell your client, really sorry, but thing made me force land. I almost crashed in a tree. We can't get shots today.
Mhm.
It is what it is until the FAA all parties involved can iron this out a little better for our business. Right now, it's a little bit of a crapshoot sometimes.
Exactly. So on top of getting your Part 107, you have to actually register your drone as well, and it gets a little unique identifier number that you have to
Yep.
put on your drone somewhere. So I just have a little label maker. I put the sticker with my drone registration number on the drone, and this is in case the drone crashes somewhere and you hurt someone, whatever, then they know who the drone is registered to. So, and I think that was like $5. It was cheap. to
Yes.
do that. Yeah. So,
Yep. And I just use permanent marker right on the side of mine.
oh, that works too. I got all fancy with a label maker. I just
You
love
sure
label
did.
makers. They're fun. Like,
If
what
you
else
got
can I
one,
label?
use it. If you don't,
Right?
permanent marker.
Yeah. My first one was a piece of paper with tape over it. Like I cut it out all small and then put a little piece of, Scotch tape
Yeah.
over it. So that works too.
That's awesome.
All right. So you have to be 16 years old to qualify for a remote pilot certification. You cannot fly in national parks, which is a shame because they're beautiful. Too bad. You can fly 30 minutes before sunrise and 30 minutes after sunset. Anything after that, you have to have special lighting on your drone so that other people can see it, airplanes, whatever. Oh, wait, here's the thing that I just hate about the limits on drones. Like you can't fly over 400 feet, right?
Yeah.
Well, in the Part 107 test, it tells you that airplanes don't fly under 700 feet unless they're landing. So like, how is that even a rule? Unless we're just like on top of an airport trying to fly. It's just stupid.
It's totally arbitrary. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. And there's a lot of times where if you have a big property, you're really wishing you could get higher than 400 feet. Sometimes doesn't cut it.
Right.
Because you just can't see all what you need to, especially if you're trying to shoot top down at something.
Mhm.
Sometimes you just can't get the whole span of the thing for sure.
Yeah.
but-
But you can, if you take off from like a rooftop deck, let's say there's a 400-foot building and you take
Mhm.
off from that rooftop deck, you can fly 400 feet above that. So technically you'd be 800 feet above the ground.
Right.
But yeah. So
Yeah.
that's an exception. So just find a really tall building, get on top of it, take your drone off. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the night stuff, a lot of those things like night flying and stuff, you have to get a special permission for those too. And there's other submissions like in the drone zone that you can submit for those kinds of unique things. Same thing with flying over people is generally a no-no, but there are some scenarios where it is permissible and sometimes you might have to get special approval. That gets a little complicated. And there was actually some new rules on that in my refresher course when I renewed about when it was and when it was just got awfully confusing. So I just recommend don't fly over people whenever possible. And that includes vehicles and stuff, cars and highways and stuff. You're generally trying to avoid that as much as you can. Sometimes, you're flying, you got to fly over, but I try not to hang my drone over flying cars. If I've got an option that I could be over the trees instead of over some main traffic road, even if there's no cars there right now, they might come as I'm taking a photo. I'll try to back it up a little bit to be over the trees instead of over where it could basically, if somebody was underneath and that thing fell out of the sky, we don't want it to fall on somebody and hurt them. So that's where that rule comes from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, those are pretty much the basic rules, to sum it up. There are
Yeah.
more rules. We won't go into all of them. We just wanted to give you guys like the most important, most relevant rules that apply to flying a drone daily for your business.
Right.
So Neil, why don't you talk about insurance? Because you had this way before I did. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a good idea to get your insurance. You can get insurance for your drone for like, in case your drone crashes, that it can be replaced.
What's that called?
So I have a DJI Refresh, Care Refresh. And that, if it breaks, so long as I can recover it, that particular one, I can send them the thing in pieces and they'll send me a new drone, and there's a fee to get that for your drone. There's also, you could get a regular insurance for your camera gear and stuff, and you might be able to get coverage for your drone as well. But the real insurance that I think is most important is the insurance that covers you and anybody who might get hurt if your drone crashes. So the liability part of it, and if somebody has to go to the hospital and has medical bills, that kind of thing. So
Yeah. And what is that, like $75 a year? It's not bad.
It's not
It's cheap.
super. Yeah, it's like cheaper than you're paying for Photoshop. I get that on Skywatch.ai is what I chose to use. As really affordable, and there's $1 million coverage on it, something like that. But it's not very expensive, so there's really very little reason not to get that. I think, if nothing else, just to have the peace of mind. And again, you can tell your clients that yes, you are insured, and you should probably have some insurance in general for liability insurance for your business too. Just, your camera falls over and lands on somebody's cat and hurts them, whatever. That's $1 million cat to them. I promise you, it's not anything until it gets hit by your camera. Then it's $1 million cat.
Exactly. And you're getting sued for all you own.
Yeah. So liability insurance for that. And generally it's two separate things. Generally your regular insurance for your business, a drone is looked at as like some very unique outlier that, oh no, well, that's not under your regular plan kind of thing. That thing's in the sky. So you do want to make sure you have insurance for that. And if you're under the impression that your current liability insurance covers that, I would triple check that with them and go, hey, let me ask you this. I've got a drone. If it crashes, does that get replaced? It probably doesn't. And hey, I've got a drone. If it lands in somebody's head, are you covering that? They probably don't. So just triple check those things.
Yeah, I had Allstate and they did not cover drones. So I think there's a couple that do, but it's probably a lot more expensive than the Skywatch AI. So check them out.
It's not their wheelhouse either. I tried to get it through my normal provider for my regular business liability, and they sent me this book of all stuff that made no sense for what my business is. It was like, so long as you're not flying over anything valuable. I'm like, house. How about a house?
Everything that we fly over.
That's it was something dumb like that. I'm like, yeah, this is never going to work for me. What? What's the point of this? So anyway, yeah, just double check that stuff.
All right, let's talk gear. Neil, what do you use for drones? What do you fly?
So I have 2 drones currently, and I rarely use my more fancy one. I have a Pro 2, a DJI Pro 2 that was my first drone that I bought, and there's nothing wrong with it. Really nice. I like it. But it's twice as big and it's twice as expensive as my Air 2. So I love the Air, and I just haven't got around to it. It's one of those things on my list, selling my Pro 2, and I'll probably get enough money to buy a new Air 2. And so, because I just like the simplicity of it. I like how small it is. It does a great job. I find it easier to get video without worrying about settings and stuff. And it has some nice little easy settings for doing some of the fly around stuff that I like to do. I do like a simple circle or a boomerang around a house sometimes, and I just hit a couple buttons and it does it. Most of them have that now, the new models and stuff like that. But anyway, it's half the price really, as mine was when I got my Pro 2. And I really haven't found much reason not to use it instead of the other, especially if it's going to fall out of the sky and break. It's going to cost me half as much to get a new one. And then the only downside I'd say is it's a little smaller sensor than my Pro 2. So if you're going to do a lot of night or twilight kind of stuff, then sure, think about the other. But if you're just like, hey, if you're going to build a business and you're going to have 5 shooters and they all need a drone, I wouldn't be buying them all a Pro 2. I can't see
or
why.
Pro 3 now.
Or Pro 3 or
2s are pretty much discontinued.
Pro 12.
Yeah.
And don't get caught up in that, right? Because there is a Pro 3, but for what we're doing, you don't need it. We're getting great pictures out of the Air 2, which is half this, maybe a quarter of the size sensor. I don't even know. It's way smaller than the Pro. And it's no one's ever said, well, the quality's not great. No, they're all like, oh, cool. So
drone photos.
I think if you're thinking about it from a business standpoint, you can get 2 of those smaller drones and have a backup drone. And so you're not out when your drone crashes one day, you still got a drone you can fly and go to your other jobs,
Yeah. I started out flying the Phantom 4 with an iPad because I liked the bigger screen. And then I had the Phantom 4 Pro, and then I switched over to the Mavic because it's so much smaller. And honestly, you can crash the Mavics and they don't break. Every time I crashed a Phantom, it was just toast. It was done.
Oh yeah.
And I think it's just the construction of like the legs on it and the way it's set up. So anyway, I switched to the Mavic 2, and I've had 2 of those. And then I bought what was it? I did buy an Air. I don't know which one it was. And I flew that it was like slow season when I bought it. So I was feeling cheap. So I flew that one for probably 6 or 9 months, and nobody knew the difference. But it didn't go as fast as I wanted it to go, and it wouldn't fly as far away as I needed it to go. But I don't think it was the Air 2. I don't know what it was, but anyways.
Yeah,
So
I don't generally fly. You fly yours. Rachel likes to fly hers in the in what is it? I forget what the mode is called. The sport mode. She flies around
oh
in sport all day long. I don't. I do sometimes, but I find sport gets me in more trouble because it just the air 2 moves pretty quickly in sport mode. It's side to side, and I'm like, whoa! If you're going the wrong, you accidentally meant to go the other way because it's turned face the other way, and you didn't switch your brain. Like, oh, that brain got close real quick.
Air brake,
So,
air brake.
so I like to use some of the cinematic modes and stuff like that just because it slows me down a little bit. I'm less likely to do that because I already gamble a lot and get real close to stuff to try and get cool perspective, especially with video to come out behind a tree and stuff. So, but the Air 2, I haven't had a problem with it being like too slow or anything like that. And it goes a good distance. So I haven't had an issue with that. But yeah, I don't know. I never flew the Air 1 and I've never flown a Mini, but I know that the new versions just keep coming out. So I'm guessing they're only getting better. So I mean,
Definitely.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about the Mavic Pro 3 that came out because it does have some cool features on it that could be useful in your business. So one thing Neil and I were talking about is, if you do video with your drone and you're doing a reel, which has to be vertical format, do your editors like put 3 clips on the screen, or do they just crop it? And mine just crop it down. So I shoot extra wide in order to capture the footage for the reels. So I keep that in mind. And sometimes they'll do a split screen, but not very often. But the 3 does have the option to shoot vertical, which I think is pretty cool, honestly.
Yeah.
That almost makes me want to spend $3,000 on a drone, or 2,500, whatever it is.
Yeah. So
I
I thought about that too. And my mindset is just like, I don't know, because how often am I just using the drone for a reel? I'm probably still doing a standard video, and then I'd have to shoot it both ways. So instead, I'm gonna end up just shooting a landscape if I need both. So I think if you end up just doing a lot of reel stuff and that's it, then yeah, that's probably the way to go. Because you do have to keep that in mind. If you're going to pull a reel out of it, you really got to think about your movements, that you're really only going to get that center sliver, that like small section. Then you got to think about your frame up that stays, that your main subject stays in the center of frame and all that. But it's not as critical on the drones just because usually you're farther away, but you do have to take it into consideration.
Totally. So the 3 also does 4K 120 frames per second and 1080p at 200 frames per second. So you could slow down your footage from the 4K, which is better than the other ones. Has a 24 millimeter equivalent focal length lens. And it's adjustable aperture from 2.8 to f11. And what else? Oh, it has a zoom on it too, which is pretty cool. That is something that I would like to have, because there's times when like having to fly all the way in to get the shot is just
yeah,
annoying.
You do end up flying in and out a lot. Yeah, that's true.
It is digital zoom
about too.
So I don't know a lot about
I'll
that.
be excited when they. What's that?
Isn't digital zoom, doesn't it like degrade the quality?
Yeah, so all you're doing is taking if your picture of 4K image is a big square, you're just cutting in on that square, making it smaller,
right?
And you're just taking a section out of it. So yeah, if you're shot 4K, it's not going to really be 4K anymore. It's going to be cropped in. It'll be like 2K or something, but and which you could do in post yourself. It just takes a little more time. If you've got editors, it's a moot point. If that's something you need, you can just like crop in on that. But yeah, what did I want to say about that? Oh, 2.8. I like the idea of 2.8, especially if you're going to do low light stuff. But most of the time, you're not going to take advantage of that 2.8 when you're flying in the sky unless you get into ND filters. And I think it's worth mentioning, you watch all these YouTube videos of all this stuff. I got invested. I bought ND filters for both my drones. And I got to tell you, I think I tried to use my ND filters once. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't go and invest in some expensive set of ND filters right out the gate. You in broad daylight, we don't really need the 2.8 in broad daylight. We're not trying to do shallow depth of field with our drone generally. I don't think it's as important. If you're going to do low light stuff, that 2.8 might be helpful, but outside of that, that's probably the only time really for what we do. Most
it could be helpful
of the time.
It could be helpful in video work. Was that your cat?
Yeah, that was Ronnie.
Hi, Ronnie.
Yeah.
So if you're doing video and you want to do a reveal, so you go behind a bush and then you come out and reveal the house, you could focus on the house and the bush would be blurry at 2.8. So that could be a cool option of time of when you would maybe want to use that lower aperture.
I think that it's still, I think honestly, anytime I've done that, I think if I'm really close to that bush, it's still kind of doing it anyway. But
Mm.
yeah, potentially. I don't know. I don't think it's as relevant if it's a matter of money and you're like going to spend an extra $1,000 for a 2.8. I don't know if it's going to be worth it, but of course that choice is up to you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right. And you just honestly, you just need a phone. You don't, they sell all these, remotes with the
Oh, yes.
screen built in, which is
Hmm.
just an added charge. When you're just getting started, you can do a lot on just your phone or a tablet, like a smaller tablet.
I was very concerned with that when I first got going because I was like, I want that big screen. I saw all these YouTube videos about getting this big screen, and at the end of the day, a lot of that stuff, like that 2.8, and that I feel like a lot of that is nice to have when you're doing something cinematic and you're really going to sit there and take the time. And most of the time, what we're doing is hurrying up and getting it done. And those things, when I had them, just got in my way. It was like,
Mm.
oh, I got to set up my tablet on this and connect this other thing, and I'm holding this. I've got my phone in my pocket. Boop, go, and it works fine. So long as you've got a decent modern phone. I have a Note 10 Plus that has good battery life. That was the biggest concern. And it has a bright screen. That was my other big concern, that I needed a bright screen. I've never had a problem seeing that thing. And if I do, I generally am just going behind in the shade somewhere, which I'm there
Mhm.
anyway because I'm hiding from the drone. I don't want to be in shot. So I'm in the bushes or I'm under a tree so it can't see me anyway. So in the shade, I've never had a problem seeing that screen, and the battery life's good. So, it's more important that I have a good plug or something in my car to recharge my phone as I go to different locations. So make sure your phone does do quick charging, because the more you use your phone for your floor plans and for your drone, it will be important that it charges quickly.
Yeah, and your Matterport and Zillow.
Yeah,
Phones
exactly.
and video. I do all my video on the phone now. So my phone
And it,
is my bread and butter.
in fact, yeah, actually, I used to always do the tablet for the Matterport, and I recently started just doing that on my phone too. So what I will do
Mhm.
sometimes is I will bring a couple of my little charging batteries,
Like
power.
power packs things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have those in the car and in my case, and so especially when you're somewhere where you can't plug it in for some reason, I just plug
Mm.
it into that so it's charging as I'm doing like regular photos. If it can't be in the car charging or something like that.
All right, let's talk settings.
Mm.
So for settings, there is a bracket setting within the DJI app.
Yep.
DJI Go, is that the app? You have to download the DJI Go app
Yeah,
on your
yeah,
phone
it's
to
a
be able
di-
to
it-
fly the drone. Sorry, should have been earlier, but we're throwing that in now. And then within the app, you can select whether you let it bracket for 3 photos or 5 photos. I do 5 just to make sure it gets that full dynamic range. And it's just you click the shutter once and it just takes 5 pics for you. It's great. I always shoot in RAW.
Yep.
You can format your card within the app, which is nice. I try to do that before each drone shoot. That way, when I get home, I just copy and paste the whole folder from the one job I did today. It's easy. They're all there.
Well, you mean before each day, right?
Yeah.
You, not before each shoot.
Don't do that. Okay, formatting the card will delete your photos, so do
Yes,
not format
do not
it.
do it after you already did a shoot.
Yes, that would be
For that
bad.
day, that would be bad. Now you got no
That's
shoots.
like my
Yeah.
worst nightmare.
No, mine too. That's why a lot of times I don't format, because I'm like, is there a chance that yesterday's shoot there still could be some missing folder? Do I have it backed up
Mhm.
somewhere? If I don't, maybe I shouldn't format today. I don't.
You don't need to format right away either. I usually wait a few days between formatting.
I do
'cause
too.
I have like 128
Yeah,
cards.
there's so much space on my card that I don't worry
Yeah.
about it too much. Just when it starts to be like half full, and I'm like, okay, I'll format it.
Yeah.
But that takes a while. I don't even bracket.
You
on my-
don't?
Nope. I shoot the DNGs. I shoot the RAWs, and if the sky is garbage, my editors are always replacing the skies. And I am a little lazy that I still send my exteriors even to be edited. If you want to save money, don't do that. But since we replace the skies so frequently too, that unless it's like perfect day and the skies look great, then yeah, I mean, I usually I'm only doing a manual bracket if there's a really like a super shadowy side of the house. Then I'll do an extra shot just to have 2 shots. But outside of that, I don't even bracket, and it works pretty good. But yeah, if it's really contrasty, then I just take an extra exposure, and I'll just basically click on the screen. I'll click in the shadows and take a shot. Then I'll click like at the sky or something, and I'll take a shot in those scenarios, and that works pretty well for me. And especially when they're going to replace the skies, it's like not a big deal. But
that reminded me. That was one thing I hated about the Air, because you had to change that setting every time you turn the drone on. you had to turn it back onto bracketing. Whereas with the Mavic
Oh.
Pro 2, it
Mhm.
saves your settings from the time before.
Oh.
So that
Yeah,
was
I don't
one
know.
thing.
I don't know that on the Air too because I never use that. That's literally all I do. Most of the time I tap on that house and that's it. But every now and again I'll tap on something. I'll tap on a dark area, tap on a bright area, and make sure I have it. If it's like some cool sunset, then maybe I'll tap on the sky, make sure I got a perfect sky. And when I'm saying tap on the screen on my phone, if you just tap somewhere, it'll auto expose the way I have it set up. It auto exposes for whatever you're tapping on. So it's so easy and fast to do. So that's generally what I do. But that's the thing I like about the Air 2. Everything I leave it in auto. I don't mess around with it.
Yeah,
I
same
leave
here.
it in auto for video too. I
Mhm.
don't play. I don't make sure I have the right shutter for shutter rate and all that kind of stuff. I just let it go. My cat's like, let me
I
tell
heard
you
him.
something about drones.
I
He
have
totally
something to
does.
say.
He totally does auto.
He's raising his hand. So I turn my sensors off. They beep at you. It's
Oh,
annoying and I hate it. So I turn mine off, but it's dangerous because sometimes you get a little scary close to branches or power lines and stuff where your drone would physically stop if you had those sensors on and it wouldn't let you go past. But it also beeps obnoxiously at you when you get close and it's
really
like, I'm
annoying.
not that close. Stop beeping at me. So for me, I just turn them off and
yeah.
watch
Oh, and
what I'm
like
doing.
loud enough that the neighbors hear your remote beeping
Yeah.
at you. Beep or beep or beep.
I
Yep.
know.
It's super loud. Yeah, I keep them on a lot of time, except for if I'm trying to fly like under some branches to reveal the house or something in the front yard. I'm trying to stay low and then come up or something. Then I'll turn them off for that because I know that the sensor's I'm gonna have a perfect movement and then it sees a shadow and it'll just like and stop and then mess up the whole shot. So I'll turn it off for that. But outside of that, I do leave it on most of the time just because sometimes it saves me because I get a little crazy sometimes and I don't notice a branch in time. Oh, hi, branch.
Mm-hmm.
But it won't save you every time, that's for sure. Even if you got those sensors on, especially if you're flying fast, it'll take longer for it to recognize something coming. But
That's true. That is
Yeah.
true. All right, let's talk about the angles. So I tell when I'm talking to a broker and they're like, well, how many drone photos do I get? I tell them you get between 8 and 15 photos. We take a front elevated shot, usually at between 10 and 15 feet. Then we do 4 angles of every corner of the house from anywhere from 50 to 100 feet to kind of show the lot size. And then we do a straight down layout view. So you hover straight over the house and point your camera straight down so that and then we go in and draw the red line around the property line. So you can see where the lot is.
Oh, do you do that every time?
Yeah.
And
Every
let me
time.
ask you, I do not do that every time. And I only do when they ask. Let me ask you this. How do you know the property line?
So I use the app Parceled and you can put in the address and it shows you the lot lines. And then I also look it up on Redfin because Redfin shows you the lot lines. So my admins are trained to look on Redfin and Redfin, not Find.
Right.
And Parceled.
And they just go by that and they draw it in. Cool. Yeah. And I've used one other thing called I think it's acrevalue.com, Acre Value or Acre Values. I can't remember. Let me see. Acrevalue.com sometimes is cool to show you some plot lines. That's helped me with drone flights to kind of figure out where I should be focusing. But I don't know if that works as well as what Rachel just mentioned. So check out any of those or all of those. Yeah.
So then we do a series of 4 photos pointing at each corner of the house from 400 feet up. And in those shots, I want to be able to see 1/3 of the shot, like the screen, the top part of the screen should be, or the photo, excuse me, should be the horizon or the sky. And the 400-foot shots are really to show where the house is located within the community.
Right.
So, yeah. Right. And I don't know. And we put a little arrow over the house on those shots because they're so far away. And I think the only time I really see those used on the MLS is when there's a lake nearby or the city or something. But we just do all 4. It's just our standard package and it's included with all of them. So, there's no question on what they're getting.
Yeah. Do you do an alternate that has the arrow and one that doesn't have the arrow, or you always just
Yeah, we had both. Same with the lot lines. We do one with and one without. And there's been a lot of times where they're like, "Oh, the lot lines are wrong. Can you fix them?" I'm like, "Yeah, send me a map or draw it. Let me know."
Right.
Especially with lots, like just land, it's hard to tell where the lot lines are. you know, you can see the map on your phone app on Parceled, and it's like, okay, well, I don't really have any landmarks to go off of. It's just trees. So it's hard to really tell. So I just do my best. Then I send it to him and say, let me know if you need me to adjust these lot lines. I did my best. Yeah.
Yeah, and it can be difficult too. That's like what we were talking about earlier, where if you can only go 400 feet and this guy has 100 acres, it's going to be very hard to see all of that. And you might not be able to. Sometimes you can get away with flying further back and see the land, but then that's going to be even harder to draw the lines for when it's fading off in the distance. I've had a time where somebody wanted me to do it for that, and I was looking at a map that they had, but of course it was from dead above. It was very hard to try to go like, well, maybe the line's going in this much, or you know what I mean? From that, because that perspective kind of warp, if you will. I think we all understand perspective, I think, from our photography, how that happens. The closer things are wider and farther away, narrower, whatever the case might be. But yeah, so think about that. And then one little trick though, if you are above 400 feet, you can't go any higher, and you still know you're not seeing everything you need to see. One trick that helps me sometimes is to do the pano shot. And it'll stitch together a bunch of photos for you, and you can get a little wider anyway. You know, I don't know if you're going to see 100 acres, but you know, if you're just not quite getting it, that's saved me a few times. I also like the pano shot if you can't get far from the house. Sometimes there's trees really close to the front of the house, and you're trying to get a shot that isn't crazy up high, or if you do go crazy up high and back up, all of a sudden those trees are blocking the front of the house. You can sometimes sneak right up into those trees. You might not see the whole house from a regular photo, but if you then do pano, a lot of times I then can at least get the whole house in shot. So that's helpful sometimes.
Yeah. And then weather. Weather is not your friend when you have a drone. Now you can fly, they're water resistant. Most drones are water resistant. So technically you can fly in the rain. Now the problem, and something that you should always tell your client, because they're always like, can you fly in the rain? I'm like, well, it's water resistant. Right. However, if water gets on the lens, it's going to look like a big splotch, like a blurry spot on your photo. And that doesn't look good. And they're like, right. Okay. Like
because they don't care about your drone. They don't care.
No.
They're like, can you just fly your drone? They don't care that your drone's going to get ruined. But what they do care is that they get the concept of, hey, remember the last time you drove in the rain without windshield wipers?
Didn't work out so well, did it?
Right. You can't see, can you? Nope.
So there is a way to get around this. If it's just sprinkling, it's not terrible. You can just aim your camera down, like straight down to the ground, and fly around. When you get to where you need to go, pop the camera up, take the shot, and then put it back down again. And or you can fly backwards too. That'll help from getting water on the lens. So I've done that a lot of times, and it's fine.
Yeah. And that'll work if it's most of the time light rain, but just try to pay attention, because what you won't notice is looking on your phone or something like that, the water droplet's not going to be as obvious. There might just be that one little guy who's right in the middle of every shot. Sometimes you can fix that in post, but it turns out there's a whole bunch of them. Your shot's going to stink and you might not notice. So just be careful. I always look at that lens before. I recommend this too. Just any weather, look at your lens before you take off to make sure something didn't get on your lens, because nothing worse than taking all those shots. It was a bright sunny day. You had nothing to worry about. You get home and there was like a little blade of grass on your lens or something. That stinks and it ruins your shots. So pay attention to that. And then wipe that thing off. If you do get a little rain on it, wipe it off as soon as it gets down. I always have a little extra, one of these blue little rags here to wipe the drone off when I get. Same thing if I'm running around with my camera in the yard and it's sprinkling a little bit, I'll take photos like that too, but I'm always drying it off as soon as I get in, because you know, the longer you leave that water on there to seep in and find the electronics, that's not good.
Yeah. So pricing your drone work, I would do a market analysis. Just go look up some other drone photographers or real estate photographers in your area and see what they're charging, and then just charge according to what they're charging. I mean, there shouldn't be like a huge discrepancy. Even if you're just starting out, just put your pricing at what they're charging. I mean, you're coming into the market, you know, you don't want to lowball to get new clients. You want to provide good work to get new clients and build up that reputation. There's nothing worse than lowballing your prices and then having to raise your prices a significant amount over the next 2 years just to get up to the average price. So I just recommend, like when I started, I did research on what they charge, and I was charging the average in the Seattle area, which to me seemed like so much money. And I was like, this is crazy, but people were booking me, and they probably saw my prices and they thought, she's good. She knows what she's doing. She charges the same as guy over
Yeah.
here, you know, whatever. So, and I haven't had to raise my prices much since then. It's just been,
Yeah.
you know, actually, I just have only raised my prices twice since then in 6 years. So,
And yeah, and on that note too, that I think you need to also consider you're a lot less likely to drop your camera on the ground than you are to crash your drone. So, take that into consideration. You don't want to be flying for
Mhm.
peanuts because your drone's going to get damaged and eventually you're going to need a new one and it costs money. So make sure you're making money with that drone.
yeah, I've pretty much gone through one drone a year, knock on wood. I've gone a long time with this drone that I have. Actually, I did crash it in last summer. Hit a power line and they landed in the grass and it's fine. The camera's a little bit crooked, but nobody would ever notice.
Yeah. Oh, and that Air 2 is way more nimble at
Yeah.
recovery from like catching a branch or something like that than my Pro 2. That thing will like flip over and catch itself and fly again. I'm like,
Whoa.
what? It saved itself a couple times where I misjudged a branch. Yeah,
Probably because it's so light. It can
I
just,
think
like,
so.
recover. Yeah.
It flies really well. And in wind too. I've been able to fly that thing even when it's fairly windy. It does a pretty good job. It's still stable and everything. So
Yeah, I have a Pro 2 that's broken right now. It's been sitting on my shelf for 2 years. I'm like, one day I'll get it repaired. And I actually found a drone repair guy in Seattle who I talked to him today on Instagram. I'm like, I need to bring my drone to you. One of these days I'll get my act together and bring it in. But it's one of those things where like, I've got a backup, but the camera's broken. It flies. It's just the camera needs replaced. So
Yeah.
all right. So research your market, see what other people are charging and charge accordingly. I charge $215 for just drone photos. So if someone calls and wants me to come out and just do drone work, it's $215. And then if it's an add-on service, I think it's $145 to add it on to photos. If I'm already there doing the job, I give them a good discount because, I'm already there. Yeah.
Oh, and one other thing too, Rachel doesn't do this. She always and I recommend what Rachel does. She always charges no matter when you fly your drone. So you have drone video as an add-on, right? Specifically.
Correct.
So if you did a walkthrough video
Mhm.
and they wanted drone footage, it would be an add-on to do drone video footage. Otherwise, you're doing it on your gimbal, right?
Correct. Yeah. So I'll do
Yeah.
ground video footage, but if they want the drone video add-on, it's like $75. And I tell them, I just say, every time we put that bird in the sky, it's a liability. Like
Yeah.
it can crash, it can fall on someone. So yeah, I just charge for it. And it's extra work and extra files and
I
extra money from my
prefer-
editors too. So
I prefer to do the footage of the house with my drone. It's so much easier to fly that thing around. You can get such cool
Mhm.
shots. So I like doing the exteriors with the drone, and 90% of the time I just use my drone when I can fly. I use my drone.
I'm with you. I prefer to use the drone as well, honestly, but
Yeah.
I'm going to get paid for it because it's extra
Yeah.
work.
No, that makes sense. And that's not
Gotta
what I
get it
started
out
out.
for
It's not what I started out in and lesson to you all. It's not what I started out doing. So it's hard for me I feel weird about changing it right now. I suppose I could and probably nobody would care, but I haven't changed that yet. So
Well, how much drone footage are you just doing a few low shots or are you doing like the full
no, I do everything. So
you do the full
my-
drone video shoot?
My walkthrough video starts at the same rate as all my stills. So if up to 1,500 square feet for stills for me is $229. If they want a walkthrough video, I charge the same amount, $229. And so in that scenario for me, I'd rather just take out the drone and fly it. But to your point and my point earlier about every time you fly your drone, it's you're at a risk that you could break it. So will I recommend you do that? I don't know. But for me, I do it just because for me, it's easier. I like it. And I'm just flying the drone when I can get away with it. But I like the shots. I think that they're way cooler when you can do a fly over the top of the house. I mean, when people see those videos, they're like, "Ooh, cool video," So there's that. But no, do an add-on charge for it, something, and put it in a package maybe, so that there's not even a discussion. They just choose it 95% of the time, whatever. But yeah, I recommend doing that too.
Yeah, and I think this next thing we're going to talk about, I'm pretty sure we just talked about this on the questions episode about upselling the drone and when to. We'll just touch on it real quick so you guys aren't bored. Don't tune out. Just hang in there. We'll make it quick. So if I have a lot of clients that will say, oh, we just need one drone shot. And I'm like, okay, well, I have to charge for the full drone shoot. We don't just offer one shot, but there's times when you get to a house and the house is sitting up on a hill and I have my drone and I have extra time, and I'll just say, I leave this up to my shooters too. I'm like, if you're there and you have time, it's up to you. I'm not going to pay you for your time of flying that drone for that one single shot. But if it's really almost impossible to get the shot with your camera. Just, throw the drone up, whatever. But if they want just like 2 shots or something, then I charge them. And then if I'm on the job and they didn't order drone and it's an equestrian property close to the water, close to the city, something where a drone would really benefit the sale of the property, then I have that conversation with the broker. Just say, hey, have you ever thought about ordering drone for this? It's a good candidate. Here's why, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, oh yeah, let's add it on. So, or vice versa. Someone orders it and it's just a basic 1,200 square foot Rambler with a box lot and nothing to show around it. I'll ask like, why are we doing drone here? Just curious. And then they'll tell me, and sometimes I just downsell them. I'm like, you don't need it. Let's not do it. Let's just save your money.
Sometimes drone is not a good idea. Nobody will tell you that, but sometimes drone is we're helping the agents here is our goal. Right. And sometimes drone of that property is not going to help them sell it. So why are we going to do it for them? They've got some, junk all over the yard and ATVs that are broken down. And like, that's not helping them sell this house. We're probably going to, if it was on the ground, we'd be avoiding that junk, right? So why are we doing a big drone shot of it? Unless they're going to pay to virtual it out or something. Sure. But something to discuss, and they'll definitely respect your work. If you're like, if they're like, hey, do you think we need to drone on this one? And you're honest, they're going to respect what you do when you're like, yeah, this one, maybe not. Cause we're probably going to be selling all that stuff in the back, which isn't going to look great from the sky view unless you want to edit it out, but that's going to cost extra. And there's your upsell for virtual, but
exactly.
And that's an upsell too on that steep front. That can be an upsell too. You can say, hey, this one, I know you're probably not thinking about drone on this one, but just so you know, here's that ground level shot where I'm trying to get the front of the yard and you can't see much of the house because the land's in the way or the trees are in the way, whatever the case is. This might be worth a drone shot in this scenario because I can get a perspective that'll show off the architecture better or whatever, show up this. Sometimes it's hard to tell the scale of the house, especially the way it's built. Sometimes it might go out behind it more and it's actually really big, but from the front, it looks like a tiny house. That's where getting up higher and seeing out beyond that house a little is going to be like, ooh, that's a pretty cool house, so you can upsell that way.
Exactly. And lastly, we want to talk about being courteous to neighbors and people that are around you. Everybody, when I fly the drone, everyone's so excited. Like passerbyers like, oh, are you flying a drone? I'm like, yes, I am. And I'm focusing, leave me alone. They actually make t-shirts that say drone pilot in operation, do not disturb or something like that. Like I need that. Just like a sign I can hang around my neck while I fly my drone. But just be courteous. People are just interested. They want to see what you're doing. They're not trying to like hassle you. Most people aren't. And then if you're flying over the neighbor's house to get the shot, just be like, people hate that. Honestly, they feel like you're spying on them. You were technically, I think, because it's airspace. I don't know for sure. But I don't think it's actually their property. I think the airspace is owned separately, but it's over
think about
their
this.
space. I would be annoyed if there was a drone in my yard. I'd be like, excuse me.
You can't tell the plane flying overhead, excuse me, this is my property. So, but people have a different perspective when it's drones and it's, they're nervous about their privacy and they think it's some Russian spy and it's ridiculous. But so you got to be cautious. If you're doing some shot that you think, I might get hollowed at for this, save that for your last shot.
Right?
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Or if the neighbor comes out and they're all hot and bothered and annoyed and like, what are you doing? Like yelling at you, which I've had that happen a few times. Just diffuse the situation, announce I'm a real estate photographer. I'm doing real estate photos for this property. And then they'll say, don't fly over my house. If I see it again, I'm going to shoot it down. I had that happen the other day. I was like, okay, good luck. I'm going to fly really fast in sport mode. It's going to be fun. Just kidding. But no, the guy was so angry. But yeah, just talk them off the ledge. Like just calm them down. Most people are understanding. As soon as you say real estate photographer, usually, or this house that's going on the market, that diffuses them. So I'm not spying. I always joke too and say, I'm not spying on you, I promise. And they're like, okay.
And that's their first thought too, is what's this guy doing spying on me and my privacy and stuff like that, right? Because they've just been watching the news and they think all the world's crumbling. So this happened to me the other day too. A lot of times you have to hide from your drone. Be aware. I was just across the street. Normally I'm across the street like in front of a tree because the tree branches will hide me and stuff, right? But for this particular scenario, it could still see me from the angle I was doing. So I had to get right up under this tree to get out of the shot. And so unbeknownst to me, because I was facing away from the house behind me, so this was technically the neighbor across the street's house.
Mhm.
The lady walked in the middle of the day, walked out to her mailbox, which I was right near, but like hiding in the bush next to it. And like all of a sudden I hear footsteps, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to let her know so she doesn't have a heart attack. And that's the
Right.
first thing I had to say, I'm sorry, miss, I don't want to startle you. I'm hiding
Uh-huh.
in the bushes from the drone, which is right there. I'm the real estate photographer for the house across the street. Sorry, I just didn't want to get into my own shot. And I explained that really quickly. And she's like, oh, and as soon as they know, because they generally will know that that house is for sale, because you know how neighborhoods are, right? So then as soon as they know that house is for sale and you say real estate photographer, that usually diffuses. But otherwise it's like, who's this weirdo? But I would avoid getting in anyone's yard if you can at all in this scenario. Sometimes there's just nowhere to hide at a house, you know?
Right.
So you do whatever you can to get out of the shot, or
Yeah.
edit yourself out in post if you have no other choice. Just stay put in one spot. I've done that before. I've stood next to like some other debris that I wanted it out anyway, and I've said, hey, editors, the debris in the back, there's also me there. Make sure every shot you just pull that out. And
Mhm.
you can do that too. But yeah.
All right. Well, that concludes our episode on drone. And biggest takeaway from today is go get a drone, get your pilot's license, and start offering it as a service. This is one of my top selling services that I offer. And it's fun. I enjoy flying. It's cool to get that bird's eye view. And
Yeah.
it's a cool service to offer.
It's not a service I dread. I dread Matterport.
Oh, for sure. 100%.
I would offer
it.
drone and regular floor plans before Matterport.
In a perfect world, Matterport would just vanish.
Yes, it would.
However, as a home buyer, it's pretty freaking rad.
No, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. It's just like my least favorite thing to actually do, because
I
it
know,
just
it's
takes
terrible.
a lot of time for what it is. And it's like,
And it's mindless. It's like so easy. A 5-year-old could do it.
it's so easy, but then it'll just mess with you for 20 minutes straight and you don't know when it will. That's the other thing. It's like, come on, really? Right now you don't understand this foot from the last foot. But
Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah. All
Drone's
right, guys.
less frustrating.
Yes, exactly. Until you crash.
Well, that's true. That is true.
Yes. All right, guys. Well, enjoy the rest of your day, and we will see you on the next one.
Thank you guys. Toodaloo.
Bye-bye.